Okay, I'm about to have an opinion that some of you are going to disagree with quite a bit, however, but please wait to the end. Once all's said and done, you might not disagree as much as you think. Role-playing games suck at immersion. And that's fine. Not everything has to be amazing in immersion. I'm not saying you cannot get some immersion through role-playing games. They're just not good at it. Particularly if you're seated down at a table with all of your friends around you. And it wouldn't matter if I didn't hear people trying to argue, oh, this isn't a role-playing game, or this thing won't work because it breaks immersion. Here's the thing. It breaks immersion for you, and your bar is lower than you think it is. When I think about getting really immersed in something I'm doing, particularly when it comes to something along the lines of an RPG, I think of doing improv and I think of doing plays. The most immersion I kind of get, where I'm so deeply in the moment that what's coming out of it is the character coming out of me without much conscious thought, would be in a long form improv. When I have an audience there, the performance is happening, and I have all of these other skills that I have worked on working away in the back of my head, where I'm not consciously thinking, oh, here's where the timing should be. But one of the things I did in my improv troupe in particular was keep the pace, because I could feel here's the place where we should be at this time when we've got X amount of moments left or X amount of minutes left. But when I'm in those scenes, the reaction's coming out of me quickly, yes-anding, finding the game if that happens to be a part of it, which is less so in the way we do a long form. Keeping myself open to the audience, I'm projecting, I'm remembering certain things about how you just interact with other actors on stage as opposed to if I was really that person in that particular situation. All of those things are in my head. But underneath everything else, I've been doing it a long time. Most of that has become second nature. I don't have to think about it anymore. And in those moments when I'm really into it, one of the problems we found is afterwards, if we try to discuss what happened during the show, what we ourselves did, it's like a dream. I can't remember any of it. We have to start talking about, like, oh no, you did this thing because I wasn't in that scene, so I remember it. Or grasp onto the little tendrils that are leaving you right at that moment. Because we found if we waited till the rehearsal to talk about it, nobody could remember what happened. We could just go, yeah, it's a good show. I remember you did something. And that's not to say all our shows were good. A bad show, you remember every second of. Like, there's bad shows burnt into my mind that I'll never forget. The good shows tend to be gone relatively quick. Sometimes you keep a moment or two, but you're so immersed in what you're doing, and there's a ton of reasons why I shouldn't be. There's a ton of things that stop that from being the kind of environment that should be immersive. I've got an audience. The person across from me is wearing whatever they were wearing. We're up on our feet. We're miming objects. We're on a relatively small stage in a bar where we usually perform. Or if we're rehearsing, we're in a theater where we rehearse. There's certain things you just don't do that the character might actually do. Like, you don't get into fights directly. Like, not a quick fight. You might do a slow motion thing. There's certain things you leave off because you are creating this with a whole bunch of other people. And all of those things are things that stop it from being totally immersive. But it's a hell of a lot more immersive than a role-playing game. Even though I use those same skills, I can leap into a character with a huge amount of depth really quickly because I'm used to doing that on stage, and I get into it. And like, people are like, oh my god, are you pissed off? I'm like, no, I'm playing a part. I'm like, fucking hell, that was cool what the character just did or what happened. But it's not nearly as deep as it is doing improv. When you're doing a scripted theater, when I was in Hamlet, I was either Rosencrantz or Guildenstern. It's been a while, and those two are always together, and every time our names are kind of mentioned, offstage in particular, it was just the both of us. But during that part, there was a moment where Ophelia came in during the scene within a scene play, the play within a play scene, and I felt the need to stand up because here's the ladies come into the room. One, that's not in the script for me anywhere. That just felt like it was right for the character. Two, I don't have that impulse. If a lady comes in, 2017, hey, I don't feel the need to stand. There, I fought it every single night. And I might kind of do that, but I would stay seated because that's what I was supposed to do. And character-wise, that's what he was supposed to do. He's fighting this impulse. It was a character choice that surprised me. It was cool. But in plays, you work the scenes over and over and over again. You know it well enough that ideally the lines are coming through you sort of without you even thinking. There's a great moment where you're terrified, like, I don't know what I'm going to say next, but then it's right there. because you've got it in there enough, you're not actively thinking about it. It's why I'd rather have an improviser across the stage from me during a show than a lot of other actors, because when I look in their eyes, they're in that moment in a way that I see less often when it comes to other actors. So while you're at the table, you've got people maybe eating, you maybe you've got some drinks there, you have a whole bunch of books and dice and other things. Every time you have to interact with the system in any way, and this includes making the decisions on what you do, because the system helps determine your toolbox. And there are actors, for example, that they've got their particular toolbox, they think that's the only toolbox you should have. The good ones I've known tend to think, oh, hey, here's a new technique or new thing, I'm going to throw it in my toolbox, I'm going to use it when it's good. But occasionally you get someone who's like, this is my one true tool. This is the only tool to use. You're like, Fred, we're taking down a chandelier. Your hammer's not going to help too much. I got a hammer, and that's how I'm taking it down. So those actors, when you look across their eyes, you sometimes see the technique and other stuff, all the other things working in there, and they're presenting a lot. But when you're right next to them, you can sometimes see in their eyes they're not in that moment with you in the same way I tend to find improvisers in that moment. There's a lot of things that are great and require immersion, but that aren't hugely good at it. Try to read a book when people are walking through the room and talking to you. You're probably going to be thrown off of it. Try to see a horror film in the daylight on the couch with people around. You're probably going to get thrown out of it. Play a weekend-long LARP where you're at a castle and there's zombies attacking you and you have very little food and there's all sorts of things going on. You're probably stuck in there a little better. Or better yet, play a LARP where half of you are prison guards and the other half are prisoners, and be at Stanford and get really immersed. So overall, you can get immersed in role-playing games and it can pull you in, but there's so much in the way that when people complain, this other thing keeps me from getting immersed, it's kind of adorable because you're already ignoring all of the things that for you should take you out of it. The same way that when I'm in an improv scene, I'm ignoring all of the things that are going on in the back of my head, and then I'm realizing that there's an audience here and all of those other things to be immersed. If you get immersed in your characters, awesome. But your argument that something stops immersion and therefore is either not a role-playing game or can't be used is only applicable to you, because that's where your bar is. I suggest having a higher bar. There's some very cool games that do some things that to some people, it kills their immersion. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. But I think you'd find if you try it some, you'll be surprised it stops getting in the way the same way THAC0 got out of the way for us a long time ago. The same way that most of the things in the game that you play now don't interrupt what you're doing. You want deep immersion? Play Dread. Bunch of people standing as far away as they can from that damn tower that if it falls, when you pull the Jenga block and put it up on top, that character dies. Your nervousness level never goes away. By the way, secret to playing Dread, in my opinion, don't let the tower fall. The tower falls, not only is the tension completely broken, you're sitting there for a while, I'm going to put it back, okay, I'm going to pull a couple pulls, put it up. And like the tension's broken, it's a really bad break in the game. I think the game works really well if, as a GM, you're trying to make them afraid it's going to fall without actually falling. You want another cool thing that has some immersion to it? 10 Candles is neat. You've got candles, like tea candles, lighting everything you're doing, and as the scenes are going on and dice are going away, as they're blowing out candles, it's getting darker and darker until finally, when you blow out the last candle and all of the players are dead, because they all die at the end, and you know that going in, when you play in the dark, and the problem with phones is it takes it away when it's like, I'm going to play lights everywhere. If you have a way you can kind of hide it, or have the light as low as possible and kind of hide it here, when you play what everyone recorded at the beginning, there's a really wonderful moment where you're in the dark and you're hearing yourself asking people for help. And it's super cool. And the immersion there is pretty awesome. But it's not every role-playing game. And the rules are there's very few rules in it. Same thing with Dread. The rules are practically gone to get out of the way of that feeling. So play your games. Enjoy the immersion. Just realize the rest of us get immersed in different ways than you do. All right, if you liked it, go ahead and hit subscribe. There will be more videos coming on the regular. You can also find me on G+, Confessions of an Improv GM, and I have a number of games I have recorded that are also in my thing. So, thank you very much. Have a great evening.